This is the executive axiom number 14. And the title is Customer In is the Cornerstone of Successful Design. And that's really a customer in design. Um, Now, most organizations are designed uh, by virtue of functional discipline, or what I call functional design. So you have your operations, you got your finance, you got your IT, you got your sales, etc. So that's all broken out into a functional area, and you have those individual disciplines headed by somebody who comes from that area. So if it's an engineering group, then it would be headed typically by an engineer, but not always. And you know, customer service is something that's almost an afterthought. It's kind of like, well, we kind of gotta do, what are we gonna do with all these customers that are calling and complaining? So they build a customer service thinking, okay, well, we won't bother the important people. But the customer service may fall under operations or sales. Typically, it's going to be operations. Um, and there's a whole slew of reasons why it falling under sales kind of falls apart. Um, Typically, because it's that person's expertise is in making a sale and not servicing a customer per se. And some of these things overlap, certainly. You have customer service people that are trying to upsell and do different things like that. So there are different designs that are out there. And when I start to talk about a customer in design, not the functional disciplines don't necessarily go away, but the design does. And I guess the best way to explain it is kind of walk you through the 95 method and what I do with organizations so they can build a customer in design. And, a customer in design is built from knowledge. It's built from going to the front line and listening to the interactions of customers with your organization, observing what's going on if that's involved in your organization, and then kind of going from there. But it's not something that I build with executives typically. Now they know what's going on. They're updated. They have some involvement. How did they get here? Meaning, how did we come up with the design that you're working on? But it's people that are in direct contact with the customer that have the knowledge, that are working on the front line of the organization and interacting with those customers. And when it's built any other way, and this is one of the toughest things for organizations to grasp because of all of the support areas that are out there, right? They want a piece of the action. They want to tell those people in customer service what to do, or the people interacting with customers. That's they're the smart people, type of thing. But you build a gap, you start to build a huge gap there. It starts small, but it gets pretty large when you're telling people on the front line that are actually dealing with customers that you know better than them about what customers want. And so the divide gets pretty harsh. And I've seen this over and over again, kind of coming from the IT world. Oh, well, we got this great new system. And meanwhile, the person that interacts with customers every day goes, it may be great to you, but it's not going to help us at all. So it's it's one of those things where you have to mitigate that by allowing the frontline people potentially even to see what you're seeing if you do see something differently that maybe the people on the front line, because they're the ones who have to deliver it, right? And if they're not with you, if they're not gaining the knowledge they need in order to interact with a customer better, then it's going to be all for naught. And there's a time and a place for the support people to come in and do things. And so this is one of the biggest differences, because people walk in an organization, so, well, what's the difference between, a customer in design and a functional design? I don't see any difference. Well, the difference is um, it's not necessarily observable by looking at an organizational chart. It's by how things are happening and being conducted on the front line. One being that the people on the front line are designing their own work because they have the knowledge, and that the support people are there to support, meaning IT, finance, all of the ancillary areas that surround what's going on in that interaction with the customer. And so, you know, what truly happens is these support areas are kind of put off to the side so that the people on the front line can build after they've gone through some observation, listening to the interactions with customers. And when I say listening to interactions with customers, I'm talking about truly listening, not trying to do a transaction with a customer, but listening to what the customer actually is calling about, and developing a system that works for the customer. Because when you're transactional, this is something that can't be done. People also say, well, they can just do that, what you're talking about, while they're doing their regular work. Well, no, they can't. And the reason they can't is because I have them listening for other things and observing other things out there, that unless you're devoted to listening and observing those things, you won't catch, because you're transacting a phone call. And sometimes measures get in the way, and there's a whole slew. That's a whole another rabbit hole that I won't go down in this episode. But in essence, the person on the front line is, because they have the knowledge, it won't get better unless their knowledge moves with whatever the new design is going to be, and that's why they need to design it. Now, after listening to some phone calls, we've developed what I call customer creed, meaning from what we've learned from listening to the phone calls, what are the things that are important to customers. And then from there, you can build a prototype of something very different than the way that you transact business today, and therefore you have a customer in design that very different than these functional disciplines out all being prima donnas, in their areas, trying to influence what the design's going to be and what their role is and how important their group is. And the only thing that's really important is the customer, and the people dealing with them have to have the tools and the design to help them to provision services that are excellent for customers. And the functional design is more than just the design itself. It's the mindset that's associated with the design that exists. And so you build the prototype, you try something, and it's going to be a work in process, but ultimately you're going to have something very different in the way that you provision services through this customer in design. Then you can begin to pull in support areas. And this really counters the existing design in both the design itself ultimately, but where, and I don't know that it's power per se, but where the knowledge exists, people perceive as a power position. Well, those customer service people, they don't make that much money and they can't be that smart. So I'm from IT and, I'm a developer and I went to a 4-year college, or I'm an executive and I have an MBA and, I should be the one telling them what to do. And that really isn't leadership. And people often think in terms of telling other people to be leadership. And then you have all of the associated fighting between each of these disciplines that are out there. You have all these barriers, they're all with different measures and things of that sort. And there's another thing that comes out of customer in design is a group of measures from the customer that everyone knows about, and that they understand that what their role is in helping to make that better, and that the front line has to deliver that, and that all of the other areas have to support it. And that's a very different mindset than you find in organizations, today. Not all. Some of them do a pretty good job, but they're typically trying to jerry rig a functional design, through these disciplines, and not without a clear aim, without a clear knowledge of what the customer wants and how it needs to be delivered. A whole slew of assumptions from these areas about what's happening, and this is why you go through this process of working with people that are going through provisioning the service on the front line, to design their own work, to get help from the support areas, and then you have something that customers want to interact with, and it's less cost, higher quality, higher customer satisfaction or experience. The experience that customers get once you design something customer in is extraordinarily different than what you typically will see. And I've seen a whole slew of things come out in recent months about how bad customer service is. Good customer service should never cost more. It always costs less, but you have to design it that way. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad customer experience, higher costs, and just people that are very frustrated working in a system that doesn't allow you to make decisions about your own work, from knowledge. So that's what I wanted to cover this week. And remember, there is always a better way.